Zechariah chapter 8, verses 11 through 17. And I'll be reading from the New King James Version. And just follow along with the version that you have. But now I will not treat the remnants of this people as in the former days, said the Lord of hosts. For the seed shall be prosperous, and the vine shall give its fruit, and the ground shall give its increase, and the heavens shall give their due. And I will cause the remnants of this people to possess all of these. And it shall come to pass that is just as it were a curse among the nation, O house of Judah, O house of Israel, so I will save you, and I shall be a blessing. Do not fear, let your hands be strong, for thus says the Lord of hosts, just as I am determined to punish you when your fathers provoked me to wrath, said the Lord of hosts, I will not relent. So again, in these days I am determined to do good to Jerusalem and the house of Judah. Do not fear. Verse 16 and 17. This is what I want you to pay close attention to. These are the things you shall do. Speak each man the truth to his neighbor. Give judgment in your gates for truth, justice, and peace. Let none of you think evil in your hearts against your neighbor, and do not love a false oath. For these things that I hate, said the Lord. If I would use a subject, I would like to say a brighter future. We have a brighter future ahead of us. And what I know and what I believe is that one of the things that hinders progress in people's lives is that they're always looking back in the past. They can't move forward because they're stuck in the past. And so I look at people, there's relationships that fail because people look at old relationships and they can't engage the new relationship because they're so busy looking in the past. There are businesses that fail because the business owner had a business and it didn't work. And so instead of concentrating on the new business, the future, he's concentrating on the old business that failed, and it never gets off the ground. There's churches. There's churches that fail because the members and the leaders can't let go of what used to be. Have you ever been in a place where they say, we ain't never done it like that? Before, this is how we did it. And the reason they can't go forward because they're too busy looking backwards. And so what I want to say is that we have to learn as a people of God to always be forward looking, forward thinking, forward believing. And the reason that's important is because forward is where the future lies. I say that we can learn the lessons of the past, but we can't live in the past. Let me say that again, because that's a mighty good word for somebody who's find themselves always stuck in the past. What somebody did to me, what happened to me, who said this to me, who treated me that way back then. Back then is gone. We're not worried about back then. What we're worried about and we're concerned about and we're headed towards is the future. And so as we are here today, as we are on our way to the future, I want us to understand we can't get to the future looking in the past. I want you to leave here today and say, I'm going to look no more in the rearview mirror only to change lanes. I'm not looking in the rearview mirror for direction. That's a good word right there. Because if you look in the rearview mirror to change lanes, that means that you're moving in another direction. But if you look in the rearview mirror for directions, means that you're going to be going backwards. And so I want to talk today about a brighter future. And let me say here, and I'll use this text because the thing is, you got to understand the people that the prophet Zechariah was talking to in this text. These folks have been in captivity for some 70 years. They had been locked in captivity for 70 years. And now they're out. And so he wanted to let them know that you can't look back to what was going on while you were in captivity. You can't look back to what was going on when you were living in sin. You got to look forward. And so now I've given myself over to Jesus. Now I'm not in the bondage of sin. And so since I'm not now in the bondage of sin, I'm looking forward to a brighter future. And so I want you to see the plight of these people as the prophet is talking to them. And really, I just want to give you a little bit of history here, because once you understand the history, you can understand the future. Now, let me say this. As we look at this text, in chapter 7, what really was going on was that these folks came to the prophet and said, now, hey, Zechariah, is it okay if we fast in the 5th month? It's going to make sense in a minute. And Zechariah says, now, the truth is the law only says that you have to fast once. And that's on the Day of Atonement. It's going to make sense. And so they asking about a fast that they've added to the calendar. In other words, God only wanted them to fast one time. But now they've added 4 more fasts to their calendar. And Zechariah said, now look, wait a minute. The law says you only need to fast once, but y'all have created these additional fasts. This is going to make sense to you in a minute. So sometimes in the church, as Protestants, we really only have 2 ordinances that we adhere to. Baptism, right, and the Lord's Supper. It's only 2. Baptism and the Lord's Supper. But we, in the church, add all these annual days. Men's Day, Women's Day, Giveaway Shoe Day, Pastor Anniversary Day, Choir Anniversary Day. All these days that we add to the calendar that has nothing to do with what God intended for us to do. Well, what am I trying to say? Just like these people worried about a fast in the 5th month, we get into church worried about this program and this annual day and that annual day. And in fact, God hadn't called us to do any of those days. God called us Protestants to baptize believers and have the Lord's Supper. And so, if our future is going to be bright, we need to focus on the things that God says we ought to be doing. How many people have fallen out because they didn't chair the anniversary committee? How many people in the church, y'all black just like me, so I know y'all been in the black church just like I have. How many people fell out because they couldn't chair the church anniversary committee? And all the stuff that people falling out about in the church don't have nothing to do with what God has called us to do. I'm going somewhere. Just stay with me. So here it is, these people, and I'm going to rush to a close, but here we are. They're asking about something. And so the prophet said, now wait a minute. Do y'all want to have this extra fast for the Lord? Or do you want to have it because y'all just want to have something else for yourself? And you know, the question becomes in the church, do we want to have these programs for the Lord? Or do we want to have them so we can put a check by our name? That's a question that the church ought to ask. Are we doing these things for the Lord? Or are we doing these things for ourselves? And so I want us to really think about our future and what it looks like. Our future looks good when we do things for the Lord. And so the prophet said, wait a minute, boys. Let me tell you something. God want to do some good things for you. He got some good plans for you. But don't you look back to the old stuff that y'all used to do. And in fact, let me tell you something. Their ancestors ended up in captivity because they were doing all this stuff that the Lord didn't call them to do. And so let me tell you, I was just thinking about all of you, those of us who's going over to TAMC real soon. Listen, God has some great things in our future. But listen, we can't be looking back and get them. God has some blessings in store for us. And I was thinking about it. There's no hospital in all of Metcom that has a gospel service. I think y'all didn't even hear what I said. What you don't realize is that you all are starting something that doesn't even exist. That's a blessing. You all are starting something that doesn't even exist. But you can't enjoy that if you start looking back to where you came from, because you're going somewhere else. We can't worry about what happened. We can't worry about who did what. We can't worry about none of that. We got to concentrate on the blessings that God is putting in our hand. I know that it takes a minute for all that to get in your head, but when you look at what God is doing, it's amazing. When I think about it, I'm amazed. I said, God took these little old people, and he took them in a place to do what nobody else has ever done. God has took this few faithful people, took them to a place to do something that has never been done before. And then, as I looked at Zechariah as he was talking to these folks, he started telling them some things that were going to happen for them. Got to remember now, they just coming out of captivity. He said, now old men and women going to be walking in the street, and children going to be playing in the street, and God's going to protect them. But I like this. On down there a little further, he said, your seeds will be prosperous, your vines will be fruitless, your vines will bear fruit, your grounds will increase, and your heavens will have dew. Now that to me is a very bright future. But when you look at that, what the prophet is telling the people, it may have been hard, but what you got to understand, I have something for you in your future. God has something for us in our future. And we only can enjoy that if we look towards the future. Now, there's a couple things I want to share with you that you may not like too much. And I know it may upset some of you, but I got to tell you, he told them about all the great things that were coming their way. He told them not to worry about what was going on in the past. He told them how their parents had messed up. But something else he told them that we need to hear as we go into our bright future. It's only 4 things, and I'm not going to even elaborate on them, because what I say is going to be pretty self-explanatory. Verse 16 and 17 is really the meat of the subject. In verse 16, he told them some stuff. And he said now, listen. In verse 16, he said now, basically what he said is you got to stop lying on one another. You got a bright future ahead of you, but you got to stop lying on one another. The verse says, speak ye every man the truth. So if he's saying speak the truth, the opposite of truth is lie. So he said you got to stop lying on one another. Next thing he said, if your future is going to be bright, you can't lie on one another. But the second thing he said is you got to stop judging one another unfairly. It's right there in the text. I knew y'all may not like this too much, but that's why I saved it. But in verse 16 he says, give judgment in your gates for truth, justice, and peace. So in other words, when you judging folks, You got to judge them fairly. And in fact, Matthew said, judge not unless you want to be judged. Yeah, because the same judgment, hey, the same judgment that you judge somebody, the same judgment going to come back on you. And so in other words, stop lying on one another. Stop judging one another unfairly. And the third one is stop plotting and planning evil against one another. I know y'all want to hear this, but in verse 17, the text said, let none of you imagine evil in your heart against your neighbor. So what that really means then, if it's in your heart, that means that you're thinking about it. If it's in your heart, that means that you're planning on doing it. And so he said, stop plotting and planning evil against one another, your neighbor. And so your future can be bright, but you got to quit planning to hurt each other. You got to quit planning to do something to your neighbor that's wrong. You see, all of us are in this thing together. If we're all in it together, we got to have good thoughts for one another. We have good plans for one another. We have to have good intentions for one another. If we don't have good intentions for one another, then it's going to hinder our chance for our future to be bright. I got one last thing. It's right there in verse 17. He says, now your future can be bright, but you got to stop agreeing with the lies that other people are telling about your brothers and sisters. I know it's true. Right there in verse 17. The Bible said, love no false oath. In other words, if somebody's telling a lie, you got to say that's a lie. Quit talking about them. Quit saying that about them. I'm not going to agree with you on that. I don't believe that. And in fact, let me tell you something. Because if they're telling you that about them, what are they telling them about you? So you're going to get on agreement with it, and then it's going to be a mess, and we got trouble and chaos and drama. Your future can't be bright if it's filled with drama. Drama don't bring nothing but more drama. And so let me tell you something. Our future is going to be bright, but all those things, we got to leave it behind us. We got to leave the lies behind us. We got to leave the judgment behind us. We got to leave this stuff behind us. We can take our lessons from the past, but we can't live in the past. When we enter that building, we got to enter brand new. We got to enter with a spirit of expectation, of hope, and prosperity that only God can give. But let me understand something. If we want our relationships to be what they ought to be, the first thing we got to understand, though, is we got to have a proper relationship with God. We got to get a proper relationship with God, and in our proper relationship with God, we can have a proper relationship with one another. I always know, believe it or not, when our folks' relationship is a little shady with God. It's easy to tell because when you can't get along with your neighbor, you and God must be having some kind of conflict. Because see, God is not an author of confusion. And if he's an author of confusion, right? If he's not an author of confusion, the only way you're going to have confusion in your life, you done disconnected from him. Yeah, I'm going to say that again. This time I'm going to say it a little slow. If you got confusion and drama in your life, and if God is not an author of confusion, the only way you could have confusion in your life, you've disconnected from him. And so the thing is, if you're going to have the proper relationship, and that's really all this is about, proper relationship, you got to get your relationship with God in order so you can have a proper relationship with your brothers and sisters. If I see you arguing and fussing and dramatizing with all your brothers and sisters, all we really need to do is have some prayer. Because what it's really saying is you done disconnected from the source of your peace. You disconnected from the source of your contentment. And you know, whenever that happens, it always shows itself out in the public. Now, let me say this. You understand that your relationship with God is a private matter, right? But if you ain't got your private matter together, your public display is going to be a mess. Let me say this. Maybe I said that in the wrong way. Let me say it in a way that I could even understand it. If you're not praying, if you're not reading your word, if you're not fasting, if you're not connecting with God, eventually that's going to show up in a public way. In a public way. And I know it's true because you can't be connected with God and acting a fool. You can't be connected with God and fussing and fighting and lying and creating all the drama that happens in situations. And so whenever you start feeling like that's going to happen, do this. Go into your prayer closet. Get your word out. If you need to go on a fast, they said in the old holiness church, if you need to turn your plate over, turn your plate over. Whatever you need to do. Because we have a great expectation that our future is going to be bright. And we're not going to be looking back to the old drama and old issues and none of that. Oh, this word is for today. Because next week, I don't want to hear about nothing that happened before. It's real. And I hope and pray that none of you going to want to be hearing about something that happened before. We're going to a place of blessings. We're going to a place of prosperity. We're going to a place where our fruit is going to bear a whole lot of fruit. So we can't bring the past with us. We're only bringing the hope for a brighter future with us. And let me lay these 4 things down one more time so we'll make sure that we know what we got to stop doing. First thing you got to do is stop lying on one another. Second thing you got to do is stop judging one another. Third thing you got to do is stop plotting and planning evil against one another. And the fourth thing you got to do is you got to stop agreeing with the lies that's being told on your brothers and sisters. Listen, don't you know most of y'all are pretty smart. Most of y'all got some discernment. You know what a lie is when you hear it. So don't be agreeing with a lie. And you remember something I used to say early on when I first got here? I always said the reason that we need to fellowship with each other and get to know each other, because whenever somebody says something about one of us, because we know each other, we already know it's not true. That's why what we're doing right here is important. So we can get to know each other. So if somebody says something about you to me, I say, oh no, I know brother so-and-so didn't say that. I know him. I know so-and-so didn't do that because I know her. And that's why it's important that we know each other, that we spend time with each other, that we get to trust each other and build the right kind of relationship with each other. Listen, 2 kinds of relationships that's going to make our future bright. Our vertical relationship that we connect with God. Our horizontal relationship that we build with each other. I want to be marching with a group of people who has great expectation that our future will definitely be bright. We can't hold on to the past, it's gone. We can't live in the past, we can't relitigate the past, it's gone. Our hope, our promise is in the future. We're going to have, and we already in the process of having, a brighter future. Let the church say brighter future. No, y'all don't mean that. Let the church say a brighter future. One more time. Let the church say a brighter future. That's what we want. We want a brighter future.
Oh God, oh Lord, everything I gave to you. Oh God, oh Lord, withhold withhold